We'll get started with our next session, How to Prevent Going into Fiscal Administration. Our instructor is David Greer. He's a certified public accountant who has served as court-appointed fiscal administrator for 5 municipalities in Louisiana. Those municipalities include Village of Gibbsland, Town of St. Joseph, City of Jeanerette, Village of Powhatan, and Town of Homer. David retired from the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office in 2011. During his 33-year career with LLA, he served in various positions, including First Assistant Legislative Auditor, Assistant Legislative Auditor and Director of Performance Audit, Assistant Legislative Auditor and Director of Investigative Audit, and other middle management roles in Performance Audit, Investigative Audit, and Special Projects. Since David's retirement from LLA, he has primarily been involved in serving the role of fiscal administrator. Please welcome Mr. David Greer.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, y'all. So I'm not going to go through much more of introducing myself. I have been doing these fiscal administration jobs based on requests from parties that begged me to do some of them. They're challenging. They're very challenging. I try my best to make things work better. If I'm leaving a place and it's not better, then I haven't done a good job. That's my goal. That's my role. Can I fix everything? No. It's not possible to fix everything. I leave it in a position of good standing, so to speak. And I really, coming here today stressed me out a little bit. You're just a very big audience, both here and online. I spent an hour doing my hair. Okay, we're going to go through a few things today. This is an overview of what I hope to talk about. I'm going to spend a little time on how is a fiscal administrator appointed and why. What are the duties in state law of a fiscal administrator? What violations and penalties could be there for the governmental entity under fiscal administration? I'm going to talk about common problems I have encountered. And when I say common, I tried to say, hey, this was in at least 2 of the 5. Now, these are all over the board, and there's not one size fits all. The size of these range from city, over 5,000, to a village with 101 people. So it's very difficult to put them all in under one umbrella and to say this is common to everyone. So I tried to put the problems that I saw the most, and at least 2 of those I saw. And then I hope to talk about how do we stop this from happening. Now, some of that's going to be kind of self-explanatory as we talk about the problems. Just cause the problems not to happen. Don't let the problems occur to begin with, and we won't be facing fiscal administration. Okay, appointment of a fiscal administrator. This is under Louisiana Revised Statute 39-1351. But the legislative auditor, the attorney general, and the state treasurer, fiscal review committee, are their designees. They'll meet and review the financial stability of political subdivisions of Louisiana. The second bullet relates to the filing to show cause to appoint a fiscal administrator if the legislative auditor, the attorney general, and the state treasurer say unanimously, has to be unanimous, that there's a need for a fiscal administrator for the political subdivision. Then the attorney general will file a motion with the court to have a fiscal administrator appointed. I want to point out the part that is related to consent. It's down toward the bottom or middle of that third bullet. If the political subdivision consents to the appointment, then both parties will file with the court saying, we want a fiscal administrator there. All of those cases I've been at, every one, all 5, has been consent orders where there was the entity consented to having a fiscal administrator appointed. And the time frame, those are in the slides. I do want to point out it's not in the slides, but I want to just go through. So what are the reasons that a fiscal administrator may be appointed? They're all contained in Revised Statute 39-1351. I say all, but they're not really all there. And I'll try to explain that. But it relates to that term, financial stability. So the Fiscal Review Committee meets and reviews financial stability of government entities. And that'll be primarily as suggested and recommended by the legislative auditor to the committee. These are the ones we see that may need some fiscal assistance. So what does financial stability mean? It means it's a condition in which the political subdivision is capable of meeting its financial obligations in a timely manner as they become due, without substantial disposition of assets outside the ordinary course of business, substantial layoffs of personnel, or revision of operations or similar actions. So that's the definition in law of financial stability. So what represents not being financially stable? The law also covers that, and it's listed in 39-1351. One is having insufficient revenue to pay 12 months of operating expenses, excluding civil judgments. 2 is failure to maintain a debt service fund. 3, material fraud, misappropriations, or intentional misrepresentation in financial records that has been discovered by any regulatory body, law enforcement agency, auditor, or governmental entity. 4, file or maintain false public records, including knowingly filing, maintaining, or certifying false, fraudulent, or materially misleading statements, financial documents, reports, or records. To receive an audit opinion other than an unmodified opinion, or having a material weakness, significant deficiency, or growing concern, or uncertainty identified in the independent audit. Violate or is in technical default of bond covenants or financing agreements, recurring or significant reliance on non-recurring sources of revenue to cover routine operating expenses, failure to timely adopt a balanced annual budget, or repeated mid-year budget adjustments, failure to make timely payments to retirement systems or health benefit plans, failure to make timely payments to the IRS or the Louisiana Department of Revenue for employee payroll taxes, failure of an auditee to not have an audit required by Louisiana Revised Statute 24.5.13 for a period of 2 consecutive years. Now, these are the reasons or the things that are listed in law that would represent a lack of financial stability. These are the things state law says we recognize today that are going to have problematic. Now, that doesn't mean the committee's going to appoint a fiscal administrator at that point. That doesn't mean the court's going to appoint one, but those are the things that lead us there. Okay. Any questions about the law? Good. There's attorneys back here. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer those questions. The fiscal administrator shall be a person recommended by the legislative auditor and the attorney general. And approved by the court. Obviously, that's a key critical part. The court has to recognize who is the fiscal administrator and say, David Greer is the fiscal administrator. And entity, here's the order that says he is. So you then have to comply with the provisions, and I'll talk about some of those in a minute, related to fiscal administration. The other parts, experience and qualifications, I don't know. You can ask somebody else that. Maybe I have them, maybe I don't, but I think I do. Here's another bullet that really will impact governmental entities that you may not recognize under fiscal administration. All costs and expenses related to independent fiscal administration is the responsibility of the political subdivision. That includes the fiscal administrator's expenses, the legislative auditor's expenses, the attorney general's expenses, the state treasurer's expenses, and anyone hired by these parties to participate in fiscal administration for the purpose of fiscal administration. Once appointed, a fiscal administrator may only, and I want to put one caveat in this only, but that's primarily, I'll tell you in a moment, may only be removed by the court at his own request. And that's what's provided in 39-13-54, or for fraud, negligence, or misconduct. So if I'm not doing my job or I do it fraudulently, I'm doing something wrong, that can be removed. But under 39-13-54, which is the state law, it does provide that the appointment of the fiscal administrator shall terminate upon his own motion or upon the motion of the Attorney General or the political subdivision if the court, critical component, if the court finds that it is reasonably certain that the debt service payments of the political subdivision will be timely made during the remainder of the current blah, 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 blah. And that you have revenue to pay expenses. So that's the provision that says fiscal administrator is requesting, I'm done, I finished. Attorney General, please file with the court to have me removed as fiscal administrator, which I'm approaching with the town of Homer now. I hope I'm approaching. It's a new daily thing. So that could happen at the request of the political subdivision, but it still has to go to the court for their approval to release the fiscal administrator. Okay? Okay. So what are the duties? Now, these are the duties that are contained in state law. I have to say that those duties change constantly as you find new and different problems. But this is what sets the stage for what a fiscal administrator is responsible for. Perform such internal investigation, financial affairs, as considered necessary. Complete access to all books, records, et cetera, et cetera. Direct all fiscal operations of the political subdivision to take whatever action deemed necessary to return the political subdivision to financial stability. Back to the second slide, which talked about financial stability. Such authority shall include, but not be limited to, the authority listed in these bullets. Amend, formulate, and execute an annual budget. Implement and maintain uniform budget guidelines. Amend, formulate, and execute capital budgets. Review and approve or disapprove all contracts for goods or services. Note the term disapprove. So you may see a contract when you get in there, or I may see a contract when I get in there and say, we got to change this. Alter or eliminate the responsibilities of officials, officers, or employees of a political subdivision as required by the fiscal emergency. I can't tell you, everywhere I've been, there were too many employees, it seemed like, based on the fiscal crisis that was there. They were spending far more money than they had. So almost everywhere I've been, as a fiscal administrator, there have been significant employee cuts. There's been changes in the functionality of certain departments of the town, our city, our village. There have been contracts that have been voided. There have been new contracts entered into to try to make it more efficient, effective, and certainly cost efficient. Employ, retain, and supervise such managerial, professional, and clerical staff as are necessary to carry out the fiscal administrator's responsibilities. I've attempted to do that by hiring municipal employees with the skill sets to do the job that's necessary. And I'll talk about some of that when I get into problems. I've only used external parties other than external accountants, external parties to do other things on a couple of occasions. I have contracted with water system, sewer system operators, so I guess you could consider those as those external parties that I brought in to do a specific job for the municipality. Reorganize, consolidate, or abolish departments, commissions, authorities, boards, blah, 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 blah. I have abolished certain activities. We'll call them departments. They weren't needed. They weren't necessary. We were spending money unnecessarily. So those things were changed. Make any appropriation, contract, expenditure, or loan. Create any new position or fill any vacancy, blah, 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 blah. Those are parts of what the fiscal administration role is all about. Let's right-size this operation. Let's get the operation running as it should. Let's follow the legal and regulatory requirements that are there. Let's make it work within the funds we have available. We'll talk in a minute about some of the problems, but 5 years ago, we had $1 million more than we have today. But we're still spending at the level of 5 years ago. That causes problems. Okay. Do I keep going and hit this thing and go backwards? Okay. The duties continued, and I just want to point out this last bullet under the duties. Under the fiscal administrator, all the officers, officials, and employees shall serve in an advisory capacity to the fiscal administrator. It would be stupid of me not to allow them to serve their constituents, provide input, provide guidance, provide advice on how those things should transpire. But at the end of the day, if we come to a disagreement, after I've listened, after we've talked, after we've discussed, after I've seen what the rights and wrongs should be, the pros and cons, fiscal administrator decision shall prevail. Any questions at this point? Good, you're all full. Okay, real brief, I hope. Violations under fiscal administration law. So, any officer, official, employee neglects or fails to refuse to provide information, records, all sorts. To deny access. So you don't provide it, but you don't give me access either. That's a violation. To refuse, fail, or neglect to transmit things that are asked for. To obstruct or impede the fiscal administrator in any manner. So obstruct or impede is a difficult one. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. But I've had occurrences in multiple municipalities where the chief executive official, the mayor, was circumventing what I was trying to get done. That they were doing things behind my back and trying to cause things to keep operating as they were, and that was impeding my ability to work. So, penalties. Any person who knowingly violates the provisions of this chapter of law subject to a civil penalty not to exceed $1,000 per violation. Now I want to stress these are subject to penalties. These are things that would require court action. I'm not the judge and jury on these. So I can say that things may not be happening the way I want them to happen, but are they clear violations that require penalties? I'm not the judge of that. Any person who violates any provision of this chapter shall be ordered to pay restitution, including legal interest. In addition to the penalties provided, if they violate what we talked about here, then they'll be fined not less than $500, no more than $5,000. A violation is also evidence of malfeasance in office, which is a criminal penalty under state law, which carries its own set of penalties. Neither the costs nor attorney fees related to any legal action pursuant to charges of misconduct or malfeasance shall be borne by the political subdivision, unless the person is found to be not guilty, basically, if the charges are unwarranted. Okay? Now, we've spent, I'm close. I spent a little time talking about what is fiscal administration. How do we get there? Why do we get there? What is it that takes place? And what are a fiscal administrator's responsibilities? Now, I'm going to try to work through the things that I have witnessed over this journey. I started my first fiscal administration job, I believe, in 2012. I did it. I'm not going to name any names at this point, but I did it. Almost immediately went to another. Almost immediately went to another. Took a break. Said, nope, not doing this anymore. These people are driving me crazy. But I did finally agree to go do another very small one, and that one was a real challenge. It was 101 people. How do you make 101 people work? Anyway, we got there to, well, no, we didn't get there. It was working when I left. And the one I'm on now is another one that I was asked to please go take this. And it's a long way to travel. It's far north Louisiana. It's the town of Homer, Louisiana. I'm trying not to talk specifically about the town of Homer, nor the city of Jeanerette, nor the village of Powhatan. I'm trying to keep this very generic. I'll see if I succeed at that. We'll find out. Audits delinquent. In every case, I can say all five, they didn't have their audits prepared and filed. None of them. Zero. Nada. So, first critical key, where's the accountability? Where's anything? 3 of them hadn't even engaged an auditor in 3 years. So, kind of crazy. Records and documents cannot be located. One municipality in particular There were no invoices. Don't know where they were. There were no check copies, no bank statements. Don't know where they were. There were no budgets, obviously. There were no book of ordinances. There were no minutes of any meetings. There was nothing to indicate that this municipality did any business at all. Anyway, it's been a common theme on records. That was the worst of the bunch. That just basically you had to start from scratch, which actually was kind of pleasant in this case. Just said, start today. But we didn't even know what the laws were. When there was no ordinance book, what are the laws of this municipality? What are the critical elements? So we just had to go with, we don't know. Anyway, accounting entries incomplete and inaccurate. It may sound to some like not a major thing. We'll fix it later. We'll catch up. Yeah, we made a few errors. That's not what I'm talking about, a few errors. When you don't post your expenses to your accounting records in 6 months, I think that's a problem. I don't, when you record a $50 expense as a $5,000 expense, or vice versa, that's a problem. But it's happened. I've seen it. So those are things that don't want to go into fiscal administration. Get your audits done, keep records, documents, and record your entries in your accounting system. Accounts payable entries not posted, and when they were posted, they were often duplicated or orphaned. So somewhere you're going to say, what does orphaned mean? And I actually, when I wrote this, I said, what word do I use here? Orphaned. You put it in the books and you forgot about it. So there's still an accounts payable from 18 years ago sitting in the books that says you owe Jimmy John $5,000. So those are the problems that you see, or I've seen, in the problem areas. Bills not paid. Common thing. And I don't know how anybody can expect. I'm just not going to pay my street light bill. They're not going to cut them off. They're never going to come cut off street lights. Why should I pay my street light bill? You know, Jimmy's a good guy. He does work for us, but you know, he knows he'll get his money sooner or later. Those are the type things that really happen. In the town of Homer, and I'm going to use Homer as an example here, their past due street light bill was $60,000. Their average monthly street light bill was $4,800 a month. Just can't do that. You got to pay for what you get. You got to. Loans, bonds, and bond reserves not paid. Okay. This has not been a single occurrence. This has been one of 3 out of the 5. So we have legal documents that say we owe, whether it be through loan documents, bond documents, and we're required to put money aside, hopefully put money aside, to pay those things when they come due. Well, there are obviously some governmental entities out there that don't think that's necessary. We don't have to pay those, I guess they think. In one case, bonds from Louisiana Department of Health, Capital One, Louisiana DEQ, all in the same entity. Hadn't been paid in 2 years. Hadn't paid a bond reserve, the reserve requirements. And I assume most of you know something a little bit about reserve requirements on these bond issues. You have reserves for depreciation, you have sinking fund reserves, you got the reserves for maintenance. They didn't put a penny into the reserves for 5 years. And they're legally required funds. So when it came time to pay, they ain't a nickel. Not a nickel to pay these things. So that's another challenge of fiscal administration is how do you get them paid? What do you do here? Bank accounts not reconciled. You can't know where you stand if you don't reconcile the bank accounts. You can't know what transactions, even if the chief executive is not reviewing those, shame on them. If the administrative staff is not reviewing those, shame on them. If you don't know what transactions are clearing the bank, you really don't know everything that's operating there. Bank accounts not reconciled. In one case, bank accounts had not been reconciled in 2.5 years. One case, they didn't have any bank statements to reconcile. They threw them away. One entity where they did have monthly bank reconciliations. Every month they had bank reconciliations. Did it tediously every month. The only problem is there were reconciling items outstanding from 3 years prior. So you're still carrying an unreconciled. So you're saying this is a deposit in transit. Okay, this was a deposit in transit from 2021. What's going on here? Those are the type things that aren't good. The other thing with the bank reconciliations, just more than likely, the legislative body, the board, the legislative body doesn't have a clue when they review. I've tried to get finance committees operating just about everywhere I've been to where they actually sit down, review monthly financials, bank reconciliations. They put their eyes on them. But they normally just don't have a clue. What does this mean? Does this mean that we owe this money? No. It just means that this is what the cash balance is based on a reconciled amount. This is the money we got available. When you see a financial report at the end of the month, you should recognize that. Any questions? Still after lunch.
I do have a question about the 5 entities that have had the fiscal issue there. Were they not paying the bills and doing the things because there was lack of funds, or was there funds there, just nobody was doing it? Or a combination of the two?
Primarily because they didn't have funds. I'm going to say primarily. In some cases, it was just lazy. I don't know how to answer that correctly.
Is there a certain amount of time that the state, if you have a political subdivision, and by law you're required to file an audit every year, how long before the state catches on that there's a set entity that hasn't filed one in 3 years by the time they get to somebody like you? Is there a standard for that?
They're watching constantly, and they're communicating with these entities constantly.
They're just inept.
And you're talking about the entities or the auditor? Okay.
Oh, no.
The entities are saying, oh yeah, we know, we got the auditor coming, we're engaged, but then the auditor says, hell, I haven't got anything from them in 6 years. I don't. But it becomes problematic far too quickly, in my opinion, to where why should we ever get to the point of needing a fiscal administrator? Legislative auditor can only do so much. There's only so many resources that they can deal with. But there are others that ought to be watching this shop. The public that put these people in office. Where's your audit? So there needs to be that type of local participation in the operations of these political subdivisions. Anything else right now? Thank you. I feel somebody asked a question. Okay. I do want to, I didn't quite finish this slide, so I want to focus on the second to the last bullet for a second. Monthly financial statements, when available, I want to stress when available. That was a common deficiency. They didn't have monthly financial statements. Were often inaccurate and unreliable. So if you don't reconcile the bank accounts, how do you even, how can you, and you don't record your entries into the accounting system, and you've got accounts payable that have been sitting out there for 5 years, how can you present and prepare a financial statement that has any semblance of showing the results of an operation? One entity presented a monthly financial statement to its board, and the board thought they were getting good information. They did. They thought this was, hey, we got financial statements. Not a balance sheet, but a statement of income and expenses. This particular entity, the bank accounts had not been reconciled in 8 months. And the reconciliations for the 3 years prior to that all contained, they used QuickBooks. So any of you familiar with QuickBooks knows that you can dump things into unreconciled category. So all this stuff, to make it balance, she dumps it into unreconciled items, which reconciles the bank account, but it's all in this long list of unreconciled items. So there's no way that the financial statements could be accurate.
Hey, David, I have a question from somebody. Can you let us know, is there something the board can look at or something that they can ask for in addition to monthly financial statements to help them determine the reliability of those statements so that they can see where the town's actually going?
I would like to see a listing of current bank balances. I'd like to see all bank accounts and bank balances. You don't have to give them the bank statements, but show them the bank balances. I would like to have a sign-off on bank reconciliations that says we've looked at these things and we know this is our correct cash balance. I also like to have an accounts payable provided to a finance committee of the board. And those accounts payable are reviewed monthly prior to the next board meeting and then can be discussed with the entire council if necessary. So those pieces of information, in addition to the financials, profit and loss, will give a strong indication that we have reconciled accounts. I don't see all this crappy stuff in the reconciliation. I know how much money we say that we owe. Not 100% certain of that, but over time, we can see that this is accurate and reliable. Is that good enough? I hope. Okay. Expenses paid from the wrong bank account. Common. I got $5 in the general fund. I got nothing in the special revenue fund. So I'm going to pay it out of the general fund. Happens all the time. Unfortunately, it's never recorded as a due to, due from. It's just paid, and it sits as an expense in this wrong fund, blah, 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 which throws off the whole accountability issue. Okay. Budgets not properly adopted, and when adopted, not monitored. A very common theme again. I say not properly adopted. In most all cases, there was a budget of some sort. In several of the cases, the budget was a one-pager for all funds, all activities, everything related, and did not contain all the elements that are necessary for a comprehensive budget. Not monitored, that includes We're going through the motions, that's all. We're going through the motions, we've adopted a budget, and it goes in the file drawer that says we adopted a budget. That's all that happens to it. Not monitored. I'm going to spend what I want to spend. I'm going to do what I want to do. That's the common issue out there. They don't monitor the budget to ensure that you're spending money in accordance with what the legislative body said you can spend. Okay? Spending practices without regard, I just covered that really. I'm going to spend what I want to spend. Yeah, they adopted a budget, but they didn't really know what they were looking at. They don't really know our needs. They don't really know how we should operate. So, spending without regard for approved budgets. One that drives me a little crazy, everywhere I go, when they have water and sewer systems, they're just not charging enough for their services. And I know that's a sore subject with a lot of poor municipalities, but you got to pay for it somehow. You can't do it and operate it if you don't have enough money to pay the expenses, and it's not cheap. So there are needs to make sure that you're charging the right amounts for your utility operations. Utility billing's often inaccurate. Well, how can that be, David? What makes them inaccurate? Well, when you just don't bill for 2 months, that's kind of a problem. When you bill for more than was authorized, that's a problem. When some people get only bills for water when they've got both water and sewer, that's a problem. So I've seen all of those occur. I've seen some favoritism of certain customers. I won't go into any more than that. Then, once we don't bill them right, we don't collect it either. So, problem in all 5. You don't have to pay the full amount. Come back, just pay what you got. Pay $20. That's fine. Your bill's $270. Pay $20. I've seen $5,000 accumulated bills. Not uncommon, where people just have not paid their water and sewer bills. And I'm only talking water and sewer. These aren't electric. I haven't dealt with an electric utility anywhere yet. Thank goodness. Although they're generally moneymakers, as is gas services, should be moneymakers. Then, okay, we didn't bill it right. We didn't collect everything, but we didn't put it in the bank either. So we've seen more than one occurrence, more than 2 occurrences of recording collections, supposedly collecting money, and I stress supposedly because I'm not 100% sure in all cases that it was actually collected, but in most cases I'm pretty sure that we didn't put it in the bank. Purchases without regard for dollars available to pay for goods or services. Again, this gets back to budgetary concerns, but, you know, we need some new vehicles. So I'm going to go out and lease 12 of them. Need may have been there. Money wasn't there. You can't do those kind of things. You can't go buy. We haven't supplied a generator for our water well, but I'm going to go out and buy a new tractor. We need a new tractor. The other one still runs, but we need a new tractor. Okay, dedicated funds not used for dedicated purposes. That's kind of self-explanatory, but if you want to know more, you know, sales tax resolutions generally carry restrictions as approved by voters. There are restrictions on monies that you get from the state in different ways and types. There's restrictions on the money you get from water and sewer rates that should go to water and sewer, not be used for the general fund. But you use those funds for purposes for which they weren't dedicated. Now, this one gets by folks real easily, particularly the elected officials. When you have a sales tax that says 60% of the money is to be used for capital improvements. Capital improvements has a pretty specific definition, but yet they're using it for all operating expenses. Well, technically, that's not what's approved by the voters for that sales tax. And that gets by the elected officials real easily. Customer meter deposits. I've seen this everywhere. We collect money from customers to get a service. We're supposed to put that money in a bank account. We keep it there. If they leave service, we're to refund that money to them, or if they leave with a bill, we apply that to their outstanding bill. I'm in the town of Homer. I'm $120,000 short right now of the meter deposit fund. I've seen that everywhere that we've had numerous uses of those monies. All of the things that have been problematic, budgets, expenses, overspending, not enough revenue. Hey, there's the money in that bank account. Let's use it. And that's what happens. Declining revenues, but spending practices unchanged. Common thing. We're still spending at a level that we were 5 years ago, but our revenues have decreased 15%. Payroll tax forms are not filed. Very common thing. I don't know why people do this. I do not understand how you cannot file your payroll tax forms in a timely manner. Do you think that the IRS and the Louisiana Department of Treasury are not going to notice? They're not going to come back at some point and say, hey, what's happening here? But I've seen it a lot. Not only are the forms not paid, the taxes are not paid. The form's not filed. Taxes are not paid. So we didn't file our Norm 941s for the last 8 quarters. That's a lot of taxes and penalties and interest. I'll pick on Homer because I'm still there. I'm going to pick on Homer right now. But there were 7 quarters unfiled and unpaid. The total tax only, forget about interest and penalties, the tax only amount for those quarters was $214,000. With penalties and interest around $380,000 to $400,000. Employee insurance and retirement payments delinquent. So we're going to pay employees. We're going to say you got health insurance. We're actually going to withhold some dollars from your check to pay for these things, both your retirement and your health insurance. And we're just not going to send that to the insurance company or the retirement system. Not uncommon. Employee benefits, health insurance, continues after termination of employee. So employee leaves service, and for the next 12 months, we just continue to pay their insurance bill. And they continue to go to the doctor under that insurance. Theft and improper payments. It happens. It's there. I've seen it. And I guess that a lot of what I'm talking about, you can understand it. We're going to take what don't belong to us, or we're going to pay things that we shouldn't be paying. That's going to get anybody in trouble real quick. Spending on certain functions without considering revenue available. Gosh, it's hard for me not to pick on individual entities, but we've got I'm going to use a library as an example. Most libraries are parish-run, but we've got a small municipal library that we want to keep. We want to keep it, but there's a parish library 2 blocks away. We want to keep this municipal library running. It's very small. We serve the kids primarily. It's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But there ain't no money for it. There's never been a source of money for it. And we can't keep paying for those kind of things. Water and sewer system deficiencies and compliance issues. I have had water and sewer system deficiencies and compliance issues just about everywhere. Brief story, town of St. Joe. This was with town of St. Joe, I was fiscal administrator. Town of St. Joe was in a significant water crisis. We were in terrible shape in St. Joe. Water was dark brown. They were even saying don't bathe in it, don't get anywhere near it. And we finally, with the state's assistance, we spent a lot of money building a whole new water system for the town of St. Joseph. But just a quick story. One day I'm walking out of town hall, and there's this lady in this big white car. Pulls up to me, and she rolls down the window. She looks at me. She's kind of a heavy-set lady, and she looks at me and says, "Are you the fiscal guy?" I don't know, but I am the fiscal administrator for the town. He said, "Well, are you going to buy me some new drawers?" And she opens the car door and commences pulling her pants down like this to show me her brown drawers. She said, "That's what y'all's water did to my clothes." So she expected me to buy new drawers. It's true, she did it. Okay. Water and sewer system deficiencies, I'm still facing them. I've faced them everywhere. Just got a new administrative order from Department of Health for Homer. Just got it yesterday. Just have to work through them. But when you neglect, lack of maintenance, which is the next bullet, you neglect your systems, you neglect the infrastructure, you use the money for other purposes, you don't collect enough money, you don't put enough money in the bank, you can't fix the things. So those are issues that are going to cause a fiscal administrator to come in, and even more so than they were yesterday. And police function, fines and court costs, not sufficient, or they're not remitted. When I say not sufficient, there are certain court costs that are legally mandated to be collected, and then they have to be remitted to other parties. Common, I say common. Yes, in 3 different places it was common. Okay, any questions on anything so far? Okay. Causes. Now, this is, I don't think I can be totally comprehensive in all causes, but I'm going to give you my short list. Public officials lack knowledge and understanding of legal and financial requirements. Can anybody agree with that? Personnel lack the knowledge and understanding of legal and financial requirements. Common? Personnel often do not have the skills needed to perform the financial activities. Lack of training. So we know we have a limited personnel pool to draw from. We know that there's not a lot of people skilled in accounting in this small area. So why don't we try to train? Why don't we use the sources available to us to try to teach people how to do their job better, and be involved from the elected official standpoint, be involved. Lack of oversight and review by chief executive. That's been very common throughout. The chief executive is not overseeing operations, not reviewing documents, not seeing the things they need to see. And the board members, the legislative body, they're also not always overseeing and reviewing. I don't want to put everyone and every entity into the same hat here, but I believe they ought to be doing more. And I'm going to try to skip forward. Audit's not engaged. We've talked about that. Information not provided to auditor, another common thing. They don't seek advice from external sources, the so-called experts. Go to the LMA, go to the legislative auditor, go ask their guidance. Desire to please constituents. I'm not going to make this change because my people in this district aren't going to like it. We're not going to agree to that. We're not going to agree to charge the proper rates because they're going to have to pay more. Regulatory requirements are not prioritized. And I'm going to talk primarily from Louisiana Department of Health, Department of Environmental Quality. That's water and sewer related issues. We get a letter from them. They say, do this. We say, oh, they're not going to make us do that. Yeah, they are. Budget not used as a management tool. We're not using this thing that we legally adopted, said that we're going to use this to collect and spend our money on. We're not going to manage from it. And there's been a general attitude of, hey, I have the authority, and I'll do what I darn well please. Solutions. Prioritize training. LMA, Legislative Auditor, Municipal Clerks Association, and I'm sure there's several dozen others that I didn't put on this slide. Review publications and guidance. Use them. Don't just review them. Use them. Seek advice from legal counsel and other external sources such as LLA and LMA. Follow and adhere to legal and regulatory requirements. Exercise proper managerial oversight. We talked about bank reconciliations. We talked about transaction review, monthly financials, budgetary comparison, contractual obligations, accounts payable, and monitoring the revenue and expenses. Don't just look at them and say, wait a minute, we've already spent 85% of our budget and we're only 1 month into the year. What are we supposed to do? I said, well, either quit spending or find a source of revenue for it. Use the expertise of external parties. I say put an external CPA here because I've seen so many times a lack of that accounting skill set. We need someone in here to help advise, oversee, review, give us that guidance. Communicate with regulatory agencies, respond to correspondence. Don't just adopt, I can't talk now. Don't just adopt a budget and forget about it. Bill and collect for the services. Live within your means. Communicate. And that's going to be, I'm going to stress chief executive and legislative body. Communicate. Talk. Try to come to some agreement. Get your audits done. And questions? Yes.
I see all your solutions and I agree with them. I wonder if you have any comments, though, from the perspective of many of us in this room, I would guess. We don't make the final decisions. We aren't, I'm not the one there, I'll speak for myself. So have you seen anything work to help? And I don't expect, like, my boss, executive director, or president, or whatever, to be at these meetings. But how do we get them to seek the expertise of the folks they're sending and listen to it? We've seen that work anywhere.
Yes, I've seen it work numerous places, all over the state, that we have to be strong enough, we have to be brave enough, we have to be wanting to see our respective entities succeed enough to say, this is what is a best practice, this is what is recommended for you, this is what I think would help me to help you. I think those are the answers to those, I call them difficult, often difficult elected officials. Does that make any sense? Maybe?
Yeah, no, it does. And I agree with that too.
It's hard.
Yeah, you don't have control of everybody.
You do not have control.
I'm not speaking from my
I'm,
Where I work, it's not, I'm not talking about that.
I know exactly, and there are many people in that same boat.
Yeah.
But your job, at least a large portion of your job, should be to make the entity that you work for operate and run in the manner that it should.
Right, one more follow-up because this has to do with it. I know there is board training, right, required by the Louisiana Legislative Office for public bodies with a board. Am I wrong?
There's certain training that's required.
Does it touch on like the budget, like you were talking about? Look at the budget, know what you're looking at.
Is it a requirement for all elected officials to attend a budget class? No.
But board members specifically who are overseeing,
They should be heavily involved. There's online information through the Louisiana Municipal Association, the Legislative Auditor's Office, that has a wealth of good, relevant information. Maybe it's a case of printing some of that out and say, can I sit down and talk to you about this? I don't know. I don't have magic answers for that either. All of these entities I got into didn't do any of that, so I wouldn't have been there otherwise.
thanks.
Anything else? Yes.
How do you get on the radar of the legislative auditor if you have decent budget, decent audits, but you're seeing a trend in your city where you're headed perhaps in an overspending or various other problems that you mentioned? How do you get on that radar?
Well,
David, can you repeat that question for the online audience?
yes, the question is, how do you get on the legislative auditor's radar as being not financially responsible, sustainable, if your audits are prepared and submitted each year, but yet there are still problems? That's the question. Okay, the answer that I have is contact the local government services unit of the legislative auditor. Tell them your concerns. Tell them that you have these thoughts and concerns. Now, their plate is full. I'm not going to say that that's going to generate an immediate response, but it's going to have them put a note in their system that says the town of Podunk may have a problem in the future because, okay? That's the only solution I have. Anything else? Thank y'all. I enjoyed it.